Hi, it's Katie here. In this little video today I wanted to share a few tips about working with Superduos. Now the reason I'm doing this is because I've been making a few beaded boxes using Superduos. My original was a hexagon shape and I've just come up with a square shape, so I'll introduce those to you in a moment so you can see what I'm talking about. But the thing is, while I was making them, it occurred to me that there's a few handy hints that are good to know when you're doing any project. So that could be boxes, it could be jewellery, and they don't just apply to Superduos, they apply to other two-holed seed beads as well. So I thought it might be quite nice if I just shared a couple of those hints with you, and then hopefully that will be something that you can use when you're working on two-holed bead projects of any kind. So let's start by showing you the two boxes that I've made and you can see a bit more what I'm talking about. Okay, so here we have my Superduo beaded boxes. The first design I created was the hexagon shape you can see in front. So let me just pan around and try and give you a better view of that. Now that one had a rivoli in the top and it's got a lid that actually lifts off. So when I came to do the next design, let me pull that forward, this square shape, I didn't just want to change the shape from hexagon to square. I was curious to know whether I could actually make a square out of the Superduos, but I also thought it would actually be nice to do a lid with a hinge. So this one just opens and closes this way. Now if I bring in my piece of 1G thread, that will just give you a little bit of a sense of scale. They're quite big boxes as beaded boxes go, so you can fit quite a bit of stuff in them. It could be beading treats or maybe chocolates or any kind of treat you want really. So that's basically the Superduo boxes. Now I'm going to share with you a little video I put together that shows you some really good tips for working with Superduos. So they apply whether you're making boxes, jewellery or anything else. So let's take a look at that. Before we get started, I want to share a few tips for working with Superduos. Most of you have probably come across these before, but just in case you haven't, let's take a closer look. First important thing is to notice that they are actually two-holed beads. So it's going to be a bit tricky to show you this in detail. But the thing with two-holed beads is that you are typically using one hole on an earlier row and then using the second hole at a later point. So that means it's so important that you check that both holes are empty before you use the bead. Now you can do this in a couple of ways. You can take your needle and just stab it through the first hole, stab it through the second hole. Yes, they're both empty, so that's good to use. Or you can actually pick up the bead on your needle as if you were working with it and just lift it up so you can see if you can see daylight through the second hole. You're not going to be able to see that well on the camera, but when you're actually doing it in reality, it's actually fairly easy to check whether a hole is blocked. If you do come across any holes that are blocked, sometimes you can unblock them by just wiggling the needle through. Often it's just a piece of glass that's got caught up. Sometimes they won't unblock, so in that case you would actually need to discard the bead. So as long as you know that, you can either check beads as you're working, or you can do what I've done and check all my beads before I start. So on the videos you won't see me checking holes and beads because I know they're both clear. But trust me, this is something you want to take the extra time to do. It is just so frustrating if you come up and find a second hole that's blocked when you're working on a later row. You'll understand what I mean when we get on with the project. So, time to get started. Now, both my boxes were made using peyote stitch, so that involved a step up at the end of every row. The thing is, it's not just peyote, but there are other bead weaving techniques that use that step up, and particularly when you're working with Superduos, because you've got two holes, you need a way to transition from one hole to another. So as it happens, in the hexagon box that I made, I used two different methods of stepping up. I'm going to show you both of those in a second. The first one is stepping up through the same bead. It might also be referred to as just passing through the second hole of the same bead. You'll see different references in different patterns, but it is something that applies across a lot of beadwork. And the thing with that is it's very simple, but it does change your direction of travel. So that's just something to think about when you're using that step up. In the second step up, you're going to see on my row 2 of my first box, I used a method that involves stepping up into the second hole of the next bead along. So that doesn't change the direction of travel. In a way, it kind of feels easier, and it's certainly something that I mostly use when I'm working in peyote stitch. In fact, it's the only step up method that I used for the square shaped box. So if you're watching this because you've got the square shaped box pattern, then that's the step up that you want to be focusing on, because that's what you'll be using in every single row. So I'm going to stop waffling on now, and I'll show you how both of those work. And as I said, these don't just apply to the beaded boxes, they apply to all sorts of Superduo projects. So it's something that's quite nice to learn, whatever you're planning on doing. So without further ado, let's have a look. Okay, so for row 1, it's very simple. All I've done is pick up 3 Superduos, obviously just moving through one of the holes, and then I've tied my working and my tail threads in a double knot just to hold those 3 beads into a little circle. I'm just going to pass through one of the beads just simply to get my thread away from the knot. And then we're going to step up on this row by passing through the second hole in that same bead. So this would reverse your direction of travel, but as we've only got 3 beads in place, you can just turn the beads over so that you're travelling in whichever direction feels comfortable. So I'll pause there, let you catch up that far, and then we'll look at how the next row goes in. In row 2, we're going to pick up 2 new duos, and we're going to pass through the second hole on the next duo from your original row of 3. So that's stitch 1. I'm going to do the same thing again. Pick up 2 beads, pass through the second hole on the next bead from the previous row. So yes, this is just peyote stitch. And in the final stitch, we're again picking up our 2 beads. Now this time you're going to pass through the second hole of the bead that was in your previous row. Remember, you've got your first bead from the next row, the row you've just been doing, right next to it. Now this time, for the step up, you're going to just pass straight into the second hole on the first bead in the row you've just stitched. So it's going to sort of pull the beads together, but it won't change your direction of travel. So I'm going to pause there, let you get that far, and then we'll take a look at the next row. Well, I hope some of that has been helpful for you for any kind of Superduo, or in fact any 2-hole seed bead project. Thank you for watching, and if you were intrigued by the beaded boxes, I've included the links to the tutorials in the description down below, so you can follow those. But don't forget to follow my YouTube channel. I'm adding a few more beading hints and tips all the time, and introductions to projects, and a bit of a mix of stuff. So I hope you enjoy it. Thank you again, and happy beading!